exactly.
If you save that to the folder that's on the other panel.
I feel like an American Idol judge. Welcome.
Always drinks water.
Drink water now.
Yes.
Thanks. Welcome to the Wednesday, April 23rd Finance meeting. The only thing on the agenda tonight is the continued business of digging through the budget that Matt is frantically typing on. 50? Yes. So prior to the meeting, I did ask Dory if there were any updates from what we reviewed last week. There were none, so we should be on the same data as last week.
I had her print out copies, or I printed out copies just in case.
Okay.
So we're all on the same thing.
Thank you.
I was not at the last meeting. Can you just catch me up real quick? I'm just looking over the minutes. We have a $666,000 gap.
Yes.
And did we fill any of that last week?
No. We discussed thoughts, and we really didn't have any decisions made. We discussed the thoughts of using some of the rainy day money for it.
I'll do that as we talk.
And then we talked about some other things that were fluid, about maybe another 200 or 300. I don't remember the exact number. It's maybe it's in there, or it's in my notes. Somewhere between 2 and 3 of other money that Rick was working on getting some finalization on, which he's on vacation this week, so we don't have those answers right now.
All right. And was he looking, with the $666,000 gap, is he looking at layoffs with that, or did he say?
Nothing was said about how it would be closed. Right now, between the money that he was looking at saving, that the fluid money,
The pot, right.
and then using some of the rainy day fund, the reserve fund, not the reserve fund. The rainy day fund.
Stabilization.
Thank you. My
I knew
brain
what you
isn't
meant.
working. The stabilization fund, that would close it.
Ran so much.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Sorry.
So we have up there this sheet. Where do we want to start? First line?
Like, maybe just to kind of make it so you have productive,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of data to go through. Which area do you want to focus on first? And we probably should break it up into those particular buckets, because I think that part of the peril of years past, as we've all experienced, is that we start to make kind of microcosm decisions, and there are many variables that kind of pop out of the blue. So that's why it's clearly chair's discretion as to how you want to kind of move forward. If one way to look at it is looking at the town managers, where he said, I'm going to take X amount, this is what I have to make up, look at those columns and say, okay, are those areas that we can impact?
I think we definitely should start with his recommendations, with that column. If not, we're going even further backwards.
Right.
So that's the third column, this column here, the town manager column. And in that column, he's already reduced some of the stuff from the initial requests to get down to that number.
Just to kind of open up discussion,
Thank you.
the part of the challenge, as we had concluded last week, was looking at that snow and ice deficit, and understanding that we're looking as a community to try to invoke a policy to ensure that we have the appropriate level of cash earmarked for that fund, such that we don't wind up having as big of a deficit to make up at the end of next fiscal year. I'd just like to revisit the concept of not funding it to the level for which he had opted to fund it. And the only reason why I suggest that, as we all recall, Once we're at that level, we fund at the higher level, it's stuck at that level. We're not going to be able to reduce that. So if we keep it level funded as we did last year, and we kick the proverbial can down the road, so to speak, with next fiscal year, it'll at least free up some operating cash. And I only offer that with a caveat. Last year, I had recommended to the Board of Selectmen that they adopt a snow and ice policy, similar to like the towns of Gloucester, Danvers, and a whole host of others who recently put a policy together that said that once you reach 50% of expenditures of the snow and ice deficit, then that requires a trigger of notification to the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. Once you hit 80%, it triggers further updates, and it gives an opportunity for the community to be made aware. And the only reason why I say that, it just seems silly to take $690-some-odd thousand dollars or $600,000 worth of quote-unquote reductions in level funded budgets, level service budgets rather, and possibly risk departmental shrinkage, if you will.
Doesn't he keep it at the same, Sean? It is level funded from 14, from the approved.
It's at 100. The requested amount was 140. Town manager
Is 100.
put it back down to 100.
Well, you did on this one, okay, that's
Yes,
good.
he
Well,
did
the-
revise
no,
it
the-
based on
Oh,
our
he
recommendations
okay,
from the
well,
last meeting.
No, there's additional on the last page.
Oh.
So there's a snow and ice deficits line, and the FY14 approved was 535,976, and that includes whatever we did from free cash into there to close the deficit.
No, I think,
So he was looking to
We're gonna need some clarification on, is he going with the 100,000 or is he going with the 400?
I believe he's
No,
going with
I
the
think
400.
four.
He's going with the
Right
4.
now, this has both of them.
Yeah, you know, he's going with the 4. That's what
The four is listed on
the tab that says deficit
the
cuts.
tab that says, yep.
So that's what, so with that said, that's the only reason why I mentioned that before. I believe that there is some play there.
so is this salary maybe that I'm looking at then?
No, there's salaries and expense.
Snow and ice.
Removal and expense.
Is that the total, though, between the 40 and you know,
Yep.
like the?
So the
yeah.
bold is the total.
Okay.
So there's 40 in salary and 60 in
An
expense.
expense. Which you have to have, because
Right.
that's you have to
Right.
have that amount.
But I think that budget number
We
is the issue.
can't go below 100, right? Because we've set it at 100.
Right.
Well, it's being carried twice on this sheet. So there's the 400 on the last page, which is showing up in that total of
Right.
43,198,713. And then there's the 100.
140. If you look at the,
Right, requested.
if you look at the level, the column, the third column, FY 2015 level fund budget. Where's that again? 40 for salaries, 100 for expense,
That's the requested.
requested and town manager.
40 and 60, 100.
I
So
don't
he
know if
adjusted
is
that,
the same as what I'm.
but not the actual, and I think that is, you know, salaries and expenses, et cetera, but.
No. So we're literally talking two different things.
Yeah.
The snow and ice deficit is a separate line item, separate account.
Correct.
And we're looking to fund it at $400,000. I'm saying, no, don't do that.
Right.
I'm saying.
Leave this one alone.
Yeah.
The salaries and expense one.
Right.
That's, yeah, salaries and
Yeah.
expenses, just what they have to pre-plan.
Can't,
Expenses assault, all the
Yeah.
other stuff, the maintenance of the vehicles.
before the snow even flies, they need
Right.
that. Because this was funded in 14 at 536,976,
No, that's the total. So what he did is he plugged in the actual number.
Like
Okay.
what the real deficit was
Right.
that year.
so what would you propose we do to that one?
Just for discussion purposes, I just say whatever it was budgeted last year. Whatever the budget number was for last year, plug that back in. And that, as we had discussed, I believe you're gonna save $100,000 or $200,000. I don't know what the number was off the top of my head.
It was like
I think Stephanie does because she's grabbing it.
it was maybe 200.
Do you have 14's budget with you,
200?
Stephanie?
Sharon, I think it was 100 last year.
Was it
Okay.
100 or 150,
I
wasn't
think it was 100.
It's always the same.
I'm just going by his budget prep,
Yeah,
page 57 of the stuff he gave us initially back in January, and it said 100.
So,
Was adjusted 2014 budget.
Yeah, we had 20,000.
so for this, let's put it to 100 or 150? What's the consensus? 150? 100?
150 is good for me. I'd like to say
150.
200, but,
Well, you just said 150.
I know, but because you threw it out there, I mean, I don't know what that fluid
You plug
money
in
that he's
150?
talking about, if, the- you know.
Let's just throw 150 for the discussion tonight. Can you, maybe we should create a new column with our recommendations.
On the summary sheet.
Whichever sheet will make it add up to the bottom.
I'm not used to the spreadsheet, so. Is this the right?
I'm not either. Is the deficit on there?
To be quite honest, it might even be easier. Look at that, create a separate tab that just says, part of our discussions right now, and that way we can just kind of look at what we've talked about, because these numbers are going to change even from our.
You can ask them to take a look at those and
And
plug
we
them
can
in.
just sum it up. I wouldn't,
Okay.
I'd save yourself the.
Is this it?
So that's 250 right there closed.
So the consensus is 150.
Yes.
The deficit fund.
It's in the laptop. Just so you know.
One of the items that he was working on was with VOTEC, and them taking another look at their budget, to see if there was any reductions. Do you guys see any value in running with that there was, since we don't know?
Not really. I don't, but.
Okay. On South Shore Voc Tech, do we know if any of the towns that are in our group, have they had their town meeting and voted on any of it, or is it still, because I know he was asking about it, but I don't know, obviously changes, we don't know, but if anybody's already voted on it, do we have a chance of getting that changed, I wonder?
I don't know what the other towns have done yet. Well, you started something.
No, I do, I've been gonna say, I'm just looking at you.
All right.
Chad. Just kind of going forward, as we had said we were going to talk about, just looking at the percent, with the reductions rather.
Yep.
I'm just referring, I don't have a page number, but in particular, this is more, less about a number and more about a kind of a policy discussion. This is, for the total of the finance committee, we have the reserve fund. It appears that he's looking to increment the reserve fund from, somehow there was a request for $50,000. I'm not quite certain where that came from, but it was looked to increase it from our current budget of $20,000 to $30,000. And what I found to be a bit disquieting was the sense as we don't know where certain other budgets may or may not come in as it relates to, from various and sundry accounts, whether it's veteran stuff all the way through whatever other account may need some extra cash. And I suppose I struggle as we look at kind of the definition of what constitutes an emergency. And I truly wonder if that money is, if we need it there, or if we should just leave it at $20,000, free up the 10, put it somewhere else. So we're not faced with, an emergency would be a roof as it relates to force majeure, or a boiler that requires immediate repair, or that elevator over at the Frollo.
But
that
10 grand isn't
didn't-
gonna plug that hole anyways.
But, well, the point is that, what constitutes an emergency? And I know that over time, we've kind of grappled back and forth as to what is really an emergency, or reserve, so to speak.
We haven't had a problem with having 20,000.
We have not, you're absolutely right.
We weren't looking to increase it because there was an issue. We haven't had an issue with not having enough in our reserve fund for an emergency. And if we're trying to close a $666,000 gap, then
Does anybody have any objection to putting a request to bring that down to 20?
No. No.
Okay.
That's it. Doesn't the town manager recommend 20,000 anyway?
You're driving with 30.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's 30.
Reserve fund.
Backwards for a second, Chad. What were we saying for snow and ice?
150?
150. So we're going, looking at Rick's proposal, it's at 100.
No. So scroll down towards the bottom, there's a snow and ice deficit.
Yeah, that's deficits.
Right, so you fund a deficit account.
Okay.
Deficits aren't listed.
It's counterintuitive, but it's kind of like it's a contra.
what did he think that he had for fluid money, for how much of a swing with that?
It was somewhere between 2 and 3.
Steph, I don't have my notes with me. Can you look through some of your notes and see some of the questions that we asked in the beginning when we were having budget talks with department heads? I know that a couple department heads had said, if I needed to shave, I could shave X amount. I don't know if Rick's already done that. Just wanted to see if we could take a look at that.
I was gonna be what I was gonna ask you guys next. Do you want to go through this binder? And what detail do we want to get into today?
When did Rick think that he would know on the fluid money?
He was meeting with his FOG group on Thursday. But there hasn't been an update on that meeting yet. So I think he's back in next week, so hopefully we'll have an update then.
I think, like in particular, highway, fire.
I know there was a lot of IT that he had already corrected.
On the sheet that Matt has on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
if we look at, in particular, column G,
Sean, I can,
Sean, can you speak up?
so if you look at column G, column, well, actually, for Hades, moved it, it's column H on his sheet.
Okay.
The comments that are there, I think if we actually look at the comments, as an example, looking at row 17, which is the town accountant expense, you'll notice that there's a comment in there that says administrative support back to 32 hours. So my point is that the reductions that he has there are
Right.
just saying we're kicking staff back, so there are,
He's already gone through and done that.
well, I just think that if we go with each line and we look at each of the comments, we can just see where the thought and the
Okay.
thinking lies. Because some of the answers, as we look through the notes, which I think is a prudent thing to do, as we look through the notes, we'll be able to
No phone for Wayne.
look at the reasons for the reduction. So, as I mentioned, so the one after, so the town accountant was that reduction back of staffing hours. That's the reason why they reduced to 5582. The next comment that exists, as Matt just described, is there's no phone for Wayne under line 28. And then the next one, capital tech, is he reduced that by 24,000, saying he's going to put it in the capital budget on a $24,000. That's what that cell comment reads.
And so has that been moved yet?
He did.
He
took
did.
it out
That's
already.
made up.
Okay.
Everything that's in column H in front of us there has stuff that the town manager has already taken out.
Okay.
Which line's that one? Okay.
So Matt and I actually have
I'm
some,
checking to make sure that the
we have tandem. So if you look at the numbers,
columns are lining up, the numbers, because I copied them over to our new column to be able to give us totals as we do things. And Excel is not fun with keeping the numbers correct when you
Mhm.
copy them.
When you,
Adds to them randomly. Okay. So that's where we're at with the two changes that we've made.
604?
No, the, right here. Yes, sorry, 604.
Is what we're looking to,
No.
that can't be
Shouldn't
right.
it be-
No.
It's like 405.
right,
If we bump over to the next columns, like the additional deficits to cut.
Yeah, no, that,
Should be.
hang
Right.
on,
That totals his old cuts.
right.
yep, let me see.
Um,
Chair, I guess to be fair and clear, just so we're all working on the same premise, the revenue pick that we're working under is 42,573,404. Even with the town manager's suggested reductions in the requested FY15 budgets, we still find ourselves 665. So the purpose of the discussion that I wanted to start with, when we talk about the snow and ice, if we have that capacity, then that reduces that deficit of 665 by $250,000.
Yeah.
Right, so then we just kind of go backwards from there, so we're at 425.
So
And then we
that's-
take, and then the less the 10,000 we had on ours, that's 435, or 415 rather. And then that's, so just I wanted to make sure that we're all, because the revenue pick is what could change, right? It could still go down a little bit, go up a little bit.
Right. But last week, there wasn't a lot of confidence that it was going to go up
Right.
or down, so I think that was the best one that we have to start with at this point.
So with that stated, though, I wonder if, Sydney had posed a great question last, which was what, how many articles exist that have, unspent monies that are in there from all departments, but most notably, school has money in there, and what other departments have money in those articles that can be used and kind of reallocated, and what opportunity exists there? That's a question, that's a big question mark we don't have an answer to yet.
Yeah.
And I just
Can you
wonder.
even do that though?
Well, we can compel them to identify, like we had that discussion before for, I think it was for the reserve for the elevator.
Mm.
With the Aravanta.
Yeah, what they did this
But it
year.
has to be turned back.
They have to turn it back.
Right, and then after it's turned back, then.
But-
I think what they're doing, what the schools want to do this year with that 75 is they had X amount put into their book budget, and they were going to reduce that expense by 75 and take that back. So they've reduced some of their expenses by that, but like Sean was saying, if there's other articles sitting there, I mean, and it has to be done through a warrant article. Is it too late that the selectmen couldn't open and then close the warrant if we could get some of that money back?
But even if they did, once the money's turned back, doesn't it have to go into the general fund, and then doesn't it need to be certified?
No, free cash is certified.
That's what I mean. It doesn't go back into, it goes back into the general fund, and we don't, and then that's spendable money in the year that you're in that it gets turned in?
No,
No.
no, it's not, you're
Carried over.
you're absolutely right, it's not available right now for this cap, but it becomes available for a future fiscal period, you're absolutely right, it's not available now. We find it now, unless you find it within this fiscal year now. So if you do it in the special before the annual, then it can be certified as part of free cash and be available for us in the fall.
And so we then, in the fall, have to vote to take that money to spend in our budget.
Or, no, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't restrict us in that regard at all.
Okay.
We currently have capital, we currently have stabilization. Those are the two initial priorities, and then we actually spend all the capital, right? So in that regard, I'm not saying we have that opportunity, but in that regard, this one naive man's opinion would be is that you would just reduce the capital side and say whatever funds you find from unspent articles, put that into capital. And then if you need to supplement your operating budget based on this one time, we all agree it's one time, we take it from the stabilization side, so it's cleaner on an accounting piece.
Okay, well then I would say at this point today, that there's too many variables for us to be going through. I'm not comfortable to go through budgets and remove money when we don't really know.
I think you're right. I think with this questions, I think what I'm getting is just how many questions are we gonna come up with? And that's how I see it too, is I see there are a lot of questions that exist.
So maybe we can kind of go through and see what we have for questions before.
Well, I think one of the.
Like this type of-
Yeah, I think the low-hanging fruit, honestly, is that budget reduction question. And, I mean, I hate to pick on poor Deb Grimmett, but I always ask her that question before she leaves, and she always answers it pretty well. How close are we to that whole notion of a waiver, and how much capacity do you have in that very tightly run budget? And I guess that's the same type of question, what are the impacts? $660,000 absorbed, if it's distributed, town side, school side, if it's distributed across the entire budget, what does that mean and to whom?
Deb gave us that number, or somebody, maybe it was.
No, Deb did. Just my point is that she came clean and said, this is exactly where I'm
Yeah.
at. Just like Sharon from the Board of Health did too. She said, this is exactly where I'm at. I'm actually looking for a reduction on a couple of items. $3,000 I happen to notice in the budget here. She said, I don't need it anymore. Take it back. I agree with you, Barbara, is we don't necessarily have enough to be able to make a good budget decision.
Cindy, do you have anything in your note? I don't have my notebook with me. Do you have anything in your notes with any of the departments? I want to say that highway or fire, one of those departments said something to the effect, if I needed to shave some money, I could do it here.
Highway said they just wanted the same as last year.
Yeah, they only wanted the
Okay.
same.
Yeah,
I knew-
his was easy.
Yeah. I'm thinking,
Or maybe it was something, the only thing he thought might go up
It was
was the
electricity,
electricity, okay. That's,
but he was
Deb
comfortable
came
with
in
last
with a
year's number.
figure, and I'm thinking that the town manager recommended, I know on library. I think that keeps us without a waiver. If we have to take additional monies from her as the additional deficit to cut, then that would, I think, go into a waiver situation with the library. The police, I know his stuff, he might be able to have a little wiggle room, I think, maybe. But the requested decreases are definitely not putting in any new people. I know that one. And I don't know, fire, I think, are they still looking at things in fire, maybe? That they might have a little wiggle room?
that's,
That was one of the things that he had mentioned last
That
week.
was one of the things he mentioned.
maybe that's what I'm thinking of. And that fire had said if he needed to, that he wouldn't get such and such, or, I have my notebook.
Police, he cut out those 2 cruisers.
Yeah, he put those back to capital, I think, yeah.
Chad?
I have a question on stabilization. Now, is this what he put together for fiscal, and has he put anything from stabilization or talked about anything from stabilization into snow and ice deficits? Nothing. So stabilization hasn't touched any of this yet at all.
That's right.
Okay, so there's a possibility still that we would need to touch some of that. Maybe.
I think that's what he's gonna use a mixture of some stabilization and whatever money he can get back.
Okay. Because the only thing I don't want to do, and this is just my personal opinion, if we need to take stabilization, I don't want to take and I don't want to see cuts in personnel. But from my own point of view, I don't want to use stabilization to save jobs either, because it sets in my mind a precedent for the unions that have like the contracts coming up, that they're going to be like, well, you know what, we can, because we knew going into this budget that the third year of one particular contract was going to sink that department, and it's done that. So if we, in my mind, just use stabilization to say save jobs, I want to try to do something that we can do it with saving jobs, but not using stabilization specifically for that, because then it just, I think, throws it out there that, you know what, negotiate what you want, because we'll always come in with the stabilization and fund you guys. So we have to kind of come up with a way to not send the wrong message
So
for those kind of things.
To give you a fair answer, and Stephanie just was looking at her notes from last week, he mentioned that in order for us to achieve the town manager's recommended budget was $400,000 in some level of attrition cuts, and then $250K coming from stabilization. So you would ask that question, and I answered it wrong. There's $250 coming from stabilization for this operating budget, at least as he had initially projected it. Yeah, I think it's a
Cutting
valid,
400,000 from the budget itself.
right.
That would be to balance it, that'd be to get rid of that 6.
That's right.
Six-
It is 665.
Yeah, not his recommended, that's not the town manager recommended column.
That is the town manager recommended column. Is town manager recommended column should be less than $600,000.
But the town manager recommended isn't balanced.
It's not balanced. That's right.
It leaves us with
It's a
the,
$665,000 deficit. That's right.
right, and that's where the 400 and the 250 from stabilization
Right.
would then balance that gap.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're
But
within
that's-
150,000, right? I think.
Well, if everyone
Well-
agrees with taking out 250,000 out of stabilization, and if everyone agrees with lowering the snow and ice deficit from 400,000 to 150,000,
Well,
then we're within.
It's an interesting kind of ideological discussion right now, if you think it through. Let's just pretend that we keep snow and ice at 400,000. But by definition, we're achieving exactly what Cynthia had suggested 2 seconds ago. Because we're not gonna take any money from any other, because you're not gonna increase one savings account for what may or may not happen, i.e. snow and ice removal, and take from another to pay salaries, expenses, and operations. So the kind of the challenge is kind of meeting in the middle, and how do you do that? And I think that it's an interesting discussion topic, to say the least. To say, you know, what is the purpose of the rainy day fund, and how do you use it? And do you use it as a, you know, to support your operating budget, with the hopes that every year you replenish it? And we had many town managers who had shifted us from one philosophy that says, no, you don't. You don't use non-reoccurring funds to support an operating budget, i.e. stabilization is not reoccurring, and then I would hate to see us go backwards in time, but I'd also hate to see us bite our nose off to spite our face for ideology. Right? But I think there's, in the absence of hearing the impacts on the departments, it's hard to kind of really formulate a well-structured opinion. But I think there are a lot of very valid points, because the piggy bank's not going to continue to grow larger. It's just not.
So if we took stabilization out, because, you know, for discussion, there's some resistance to the stabilization, and we pulled the snow and ice back, we're achieving, like Sean just said in much better, nicer words, we're achieving the same thing. We're not pulling up, he wasn't counting anything from snow and ice coming out in the numbers that Stephanie had in her notes. The 400 and the 250. The 250 was from stabilization, not from snow and ice. He was leaving snow and ice alone. So if there's the heartburn over the stabilization, is there heartburn over pulling it from snow and ice?
I think snow and ice should be lowered. I think that
So everybody agrees on that.
Yeah.
So maybe he can achieve the same thing without using stabilization by pulling snow and ice, and then the 400 that he had mentioned last week. Some of that was in money that he hadn't nailed down changes in yet, and however else he was going to close the 400. And stabilization stays untouched.
Unless he can't, you know.
Chad, if we pull money from stabilization, we just got a good rating from Standard and Poor's.
It's going to affect that.
Because we had that, that's going to affect it if we lower it a lot.
Well, we just pulled it last year too,
Yeah.
for snow and ice, and we still got the same.
We put it back.
And we put it back, which
Yeah,
I
as long as
think,
you can put it back.
yeah. And that would be the desire with this, the same thing.
I don't know if we can add enough money.
Yeah, how many times are we going to be able to do that?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm glad we
Rather
are able
lower
to do
the
it, let me
snow
just
and
say
ice.
that.
Then-
I agree, pull it from snow and ice.
Yeah. So what's it look like if we do that?
That's the number that's on there
That's where
now.
we're at, that number, I'll make that bold so it's bigger.
It's 405,926, or 925, I can't see that good.
That includes the 10,000 from,
Zoom it way in.
that includes the 10,000 off of,
that better?
the reserve fund too, correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's the 10,000 off the reserve fund and the 250
Off of the snow and ice.
And that's no other changes as of yet. And the number two lines above that, the 40,617 is warrant articles total. That was one of the things I had to find to figure out where that was coming from.
And then we basically have a lot of questions.
You know, most notably, I apologize, just kind of spotting that one out, but most notably, we talked last year with regards to the way the free cash estimates are coming through. And I understand that there is a drive, right? The DOR suggests that every community has between 3% and 5% of their annual budget should be as part of free cash. So how close do we think that we are? Right? We have tighter fiscal controls. Sue's been doing a great job with regards to getting the books certified quicker. So how are we trending? And as we all appreciate, what is the savings account seemingly in town hall? And the savings account seemingly is, as we all hear it, it's in Medicare, it's in health insurance. Seems to be the piggy bank that we seem to be able to transfer funds from. So I just wonder how much do we anticipate in free cash? The reason why I asked that question, because if you take $42 million, you get 3% of that, that's $1.2 million. That's a pretty sizable chunk of change.
Yeah.
And what have we been averaging? Have we been averaging the 3% over the?
No, we have not. I don't have the trend in front of me, but I just know last year was about 1.75. The reason why I asked the question again is just there's one of those unknown revenue questions.
Sue would have a better idea then.
Yeah, Sue and Rick both would have a better idea.
Can we make a request of the town accountant to find out how many outstanding articles that haven't been used?
We requested that last week, I think.
Oh, we did, okay.
We can ask again.
Well, I think probably because Rick wasn't the issue.
Yeah.
That's the regular cost. That's the stuff.
It's non-salaries, correct?
No,
Non-salaries, other than salaries, correct?
Capital type items.
You put it
the
on,
deficit.
fix it, build
Right,
it.
no, because what hasn't been spent, that's what you're saying.
It's just an expense.
How did it get in there? Still hasn't.
The word deficit and what's the actual.
Okay.
He still needs to staff bodies. That's salary expense. That's equipment. That's always going to be. The deficit amount is how much more do you need?
Right, which he didn't go into.
Which he
Sure, how much more there is without having the answers.
Right.
Hmm.
Some places practice actually ordering a freezing of the budget, period.
It's a policy. You know what I mean?
Emergency type of
It's kind
spending.
of like,
So if you knew how much is in there, then you'd know if it's worth doing or not.
Well, most of what the increases are, we went through it last week, a lot of it is contractual. And the increases, it's minimal increases when you go through the line.
I'm thinking
by line.
of it as in the present budget.
Chad?
Unexpended.
I'm sorry. I would defer the floor to Miss Daisy. You're going to say something, I interrupted you. No?
No, I wasn't. I was waiting for you.
I would actually encourage us to take the following steps, just as a kind of a series of action. One, request through the town manager of the departments to identify the impacts of a budget cut to help, I guess the town manager's plan to overcome the $665,000 deficit, and what that would mean as an impact in budget reductions. Let's identify what that impact is. Let's just kind of cut to the chase and just ask that question. I think we should also ask the revenue question, both as Cindy and Rick had just pointed out, as it relates to the articles. right? How many open articles exist that have funding in there that just kind of sitting there
It's not
waiting?
spent.
The next question I was posed with the articles I think we should ask is,
Go way too fast for me, Sean. Sorry.
Shouldn't
is
the
it,
secretary be taking those notes?
is it too late?
That's good.
Cindy's question was, is it too late to reopen the warrant if indeed we find available sums? To put a warrant article on there to recapture it. And then lastly, the snow and ice question as it relates to fiscal policy statement. I mean, that's one of those questions that we have to kind of get down to brass tacks. Rick had agreed, both in principle and practice, that he wants to see the number increase, but this year may not be the year to do it. So
Sacrifices
I
are
don't
worth
think that we're
doing.
at loggerheads. I think we're all kind of working in the same direction.
Plus, once we increase that, we can't take it back down.
Right. Exactly, and I think that's one of those perilous pieces that we might have really good policy.
Right.
We just, it's kind of like having a pretty soup but no church to go to.
I like that.
So with,
And then also, did you ask also about how we're trending as far as the free cash?
No, I did not, thank you. Hey, Barbara, did we talk about free cash at all?
Barbara, do you want me to ask him about how we're trending with free cash?
Could you do that?
Does anybody see any value in continuing to go through this with this many questions?
No.
I mean, it seems that, okay. Moving on to liaison reports. Are there any liaison reports? Review of minutes. The minutes were from the April 16th meeting. Excused were Barbara and Matt. Does anybody have a motion on that?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He was
He
here.
was here.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed?
I'm abstaining,
Abstaining?
too. You, Matt, because we're on here.
School fundraiser.
We're at the Celtics.
Good job.
You weren't sitting in the seats.
No correspondence. Next meeting is next week, same time, same place. Does anybody have any motions?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining?
Quick, Barbara.